Well, if you're into podcast and politics, then this segment is just for you. There's a new nonpartisan educational podcast providing Mainers with a closer look at the mechanics of elections in Maine.
The Bowdoin College students behind it are now partnering with the Maine Department of Education to create classroom tools based on the podcast. Here to tell us all about it, the podcast and the collaboration are Natalie Emmerson and Larsen Van Horn. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So how did the podcast come about in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it started, both Larsen and I worked for Senator King's re-election campaign in 2024, and I helped collect signatures for him to help him get on the ballot. And the most common response I received when I was asking people to sign to put him on the ballot was, isn't he on the ballot already? Because he's an incumbent. And I got to explain that no, like everyone, regardless of incumbency, needs a certain number of signatures to qualify for the ballot. And it was cool because even if people didn't like Senator King or they did like Senator King, we got to bond over that sort of love or interest in the civic process, and it was an opportunity to impart like a positive civic experience. And so we were thinking about classes and like summer stuff, and we were like, it would be really cool to create a tool where we learned all about these like little niche rules that you maybe didn't know or only come to understand if you're working in the industry or in the professional landscape, because it impacts all of our lives. And then
so the story goes, Natalie came to me last fall and told me her idea for the podcast, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I was super skeptical at first. I was like, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do this with all of our other coursework going on during college. And whenever we met with our advisor, shout out Professor Testa-Kolokol, we realized that we could actually each drop a class and then add another class as an independent study so that we could actually do this podcast. And then we received funding through that and met with a podcast producer and everything. So that was kind of how this got on the ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are some of your subjects, and how do you choose what to cover?
Yeah, I mean, some of the subjects were like ranked choice voting, clean elections funding, which is specific to Maine. We had one episode on the difference between Maine state government and federal government. And I think it was a combination of just things we were interested in. Like I know Larsen will probably talk about ranked choice voting. And then people we were interested in talking to. So like we had the opportunity to hear from former Secretary of Defense Bill Cohen and his first campaign manager, Chris Potholm. And they like told us the story of the walk across Maine. And so we put together all of the little things we had learned about campaigns and had them tell that story.
Yeah, and there are a few things that I think, you know, and even I didn't know about Maine government coming in. I'm from Oklahoma, so starting this podcast, I didn't know as much about Maine government and elections as Natalie did. And so I think one of the things, ranked choice voting was one of them. Another one was clean elections funding is kind of a big part of our elections here in Maine. That we actually have a full episode dedicated to on that you can listen, and I found that one super fascinating.
Tell us about some of the other guests you've had on the show and maybe the response from listeners.
Yeah, so we've had a guest from a wide variety of a political spectrum, and even some that are just very nonpartisan or may not even be politicians at all. We've had journalists come on and talk about even like the Maine news and how the Maine media covers stories. We've even had one of our senators, Senator Angus King, on the podcast, as well as the Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows. So several different people talking about their different roles. I believe Shenna Bellows talked about, the beginning, kind of an introduction of Maine state government and how that works. That was our first episode. So that's kind of how it started, yeah.
This might be interesting too, because not only are you educating the public, but you're probably educating yourselves as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the core tenets of the podcast is our identity as students. So the idea is like, we are learning this process. These are questions we wanted to answer. And we thought we cannot be the only people with these questions. And I think as like young people getting interested in politics and going, okay, political conversation has sort of existed around us ever since 2016. We were like 11, 12 in 2016. And so it started really early. But it's really overwhelming. It's like there's so much. How do you get involved? Where do you learn about it? What issues do you want to do? And so the goal was to use our identity as students to, we are not the only ones with these questions, so maybe if we break it down and create a platform, other students will be interested in learning with us.
Let's talk about the collaboration with the Maine Department of Education and how you're hoping to further help students.
Yeah, so the idea was actually, one of the ideas when we created the podcast was, wouldn't this be so cool if we could create it as a classroom tool? But we needed to create the tool first. And so once we created it, we had it, and we were like, you know what, this is feasible for Maine classrooms. We reached out to someone at the Maine Department of Ed, and we were like, hey, like we've created this tool. We would love to make it adaptable to the classroom. We're not quite sure how to do that. Of course, we're not educators. Is this something that would be of use? And the idea was, it's completely volunteer-based. Like it's a volunteer partnership, and they were like, oh my God, absolutely. And so
Natalie and I have been hard at work drafting questions for these, for each of the episodes, and kind of like we want to write down questions so that a listener can kind of take in the main points. So we kind of highlight what we want you to know out of each of the episode, and then you can write the questions or fill in answers. So that's kind of what we were thinking about for how students could learn from these podcasts.
You guys are doing this for a while. Have you thought about, man, you know what, maybe this might be kind of cool to do it as a living and maybe try to make some money on it?
Potentially.
Yes and no. I think one of the cool parts about this was the idea of making civics accessible, and the idea of there not being a paywall in front of that. And so, of course, there are other ways to make money than a paywall, but that was like the first goal of the podcast. And so we don't want to ever take away from anything that might make it accessible. In terms of a living, I mean, we both got 2 more years of college, so we've got to figure that out. But yeah, it's been really neat to learn about journalism as a craft and to practice it, and it's definitely something I'm interested in.
Awesome. And where can people listen to the podcast?
Ooh, that's a great question. So right now it's on Spotify at Pine State Politics in Session. It's also on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. You can also find it on Bowdoin College's McKean Center website. So those are kind of the 3 places we have.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, really interesting. I'm going to have to listen to one of your episodes.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
keep us posted, you know, on the collaboration, and we can share updates with our viewers. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
It's exciting too, since we have a gubernatorial election coming up.
We
So.
do.
right.
We're
Definitely.
actually, we're interviewing primary candidates right now.
All right.
That's
Keep
season
us
2.
posted. Well,